Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I'm super excited to come talk to you. U.B. Blake, the great ragtime composer and pianist, was in his 90s when he said, "If I'd known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself." Aging is a universal concern. We're all doing it every day, even before we're born into the world, even here as you sit here listening to these fabulous speakers. And there's not one of us that gets out of this life alive, at least not yet. Now, my foray into this field started when I hadn't really thought much about aging at all. I was about 7 years old. My older sister, Lily, was 11. We were young and full of energy and life, when one day my sister, Lily, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, or juvenile diabetes. At the time, we slept in adjoining bedrooms separated by a glass door, and this door became a window into the type of life I'd previously had no concept of. After Lily's diagnosis, every night at 3 in the morning, my dad would enter her room and sit beside her bed and coax her to check her blood sugar, prick her finger with a needle, and make sure that she wasn't overloaded or depleted of the essential blood sugars necessary for survival. The first few months were particularly tough for my sister as she got accustomed to a life of needles, managing her diet, being limited by how her body would react on any given day. Here's my sister. Forgot I had that picture for you guys. And she really had to think about how her new lifestyle would really influence the way that she moved through her day, whether she would be kept from soccer practice or even school. And I remember particularly peering through those glass windows, watching my sister slumped over in exhaustion as my dad sat there patiently coaxing her to prick her finger yet again. And the few terrifying nights where she crashed and her blood sugar dropped precipitously low, causing her to pass out, and my dad to furiously rub glucose into her gums, waiting for her to revive, crying, upset, and confused. Needless to say, my education from the other side of that glass door was one of the most profound and moving experiences in my life. I knew that I wanted to do something that would help. Now, as I grew older, my passion for science flourished, and my interest in studying disease and therapeutic strategies took flight. I wanted to know, how can we help somebody when their own bodies attack? Now, longevity expert Aubrey de Grey has spoken widely about the 7 deadly things that lead to damage and aging of our cells. And I want to focus on one of these, which is chromosomal mutations. That is, mutations to the string of letters that make up our DNA. Roughly 6,000 diseases are caused by mutations to our genes, and yet only 5% have an approved therapy. Part of the problem is that we don't know what all of these mutations do. We don't know whether they're responsible for causing or mediating the disease, and even if we have an idea, we don't necessarily know how to resolve it, or we don't know how to change this mutation to make that disease better. So with the rise and development of genome editing technologies, such as CRISPR-Cas9, which Martin mentioned in his talk, we actually are getting this power to interrogate each of these genetic lesions with incredible precision. And already there are thousands of labs all over the world that are working to understand biology at a furious pace so that we can understand the function of some of these mutations and how they're relevant in the disease, whether they might be a viable target for therapeutic intervention. And the ease of use of this technology means that thousands of labs all over the world are able to do this faster than ever before. Now, for the small group of diseases that are the sole result of losing the genetic lottery, this is a revolutionary moment. Genome editing has already been used in a wide array of organisms, including humans. Already, many gene therapies are in clinical trials. They're helping patients around the world with diseases like hereditary blindness, sickle cell anemia, even certain types of cancers. Gene editing is providing us an opportunity not only to cure genetic diseases, but also to prevent these diseases from ever coming into being, to address our susceptibilities before they manifest. And in fact, recent work done in the lab of Professor David Liu at Harvard University is using base editing, which is changing a single letter of DNA sequence, to treat a disorder called progeria in a mouse model, which is basically a premature aging disorder. So with this technology in hand, for the first time, we are now able to ask the question, is aging just an engineering problem? Now, for example, there are some protective variants that have an outsized impact. Some of these are associated with a low risk of cancer, others with extra strong bones, or viral resistance. What if we were able to install these genes to prevent us from getting infection, to prevent us from getting Alzheimer's, to prevent us from getting aging itself? So, just last week, also mentioned in Martin's talk, a researcher from China announced or claimed that he had made genetic modifications to human embryos. And in doing so, he said that he modified a gene called CCR5 with the hopes of preventing infection by HIV in these newborns. And this experiment resulted in the live birth of 2 human babies. While this step is radical and widely criticized by the scientific community, it is clear that the future is here and now. We are learning to engineer our cells to be resilient in the face of age-related diseases, and I believe in the not too distant future, we will be able to engineer resilience to aging itself. This will change our world as we know it. And as gene editing becomes more commonplace, I can imagine that part of our childhood checkups will be staged genetic treatments, much like the barrage of vaccines we get in early childhood. But instead of training our immune system, we are training our cells to form tissues, organs, bodies that are stronger, more resilient, and able to produce a body that is better equipped to handle the stressors of our modern day world, to enable an increased health span to pair to our increasing lifespan. And I believe we will begin preventing diseases before they manifest, rather than treating them after they've already become symptomatic, to avoid the unknown genetic traps that inevitably lead to disease, or to enable creation of a sturdier physical body to move through the world with greater agility, strength, and cognitive function well into our 70s, 80s, and beyond. Maybe we could have identified that my sister Lily had post-viral autoimmunity and saved my family from a lot of stress and heartache. Now, as a scientist, the promise of this future is incredibly exciting, not only because of what we will learn, but how we will grow and how we will evolve to prepare us for the coming centuries of life on Earth, or perhaps beyond. Now, some critics would argue that what we're doing is unnatural, that we should leave this up to nature, that aging and disease are part of life. And yet, so much of our world we engineer to suit our needs, often without any other consideration than that it suits our busy lifestyle. Now, of course, there are the tummy tucks, the prosthetics, things we don't need to survive, but that make our lives better. And we have been doing unnatural things to our bodies for centuries. So what if we took this perspective, married it to a more thoughtful intention, and applied it to re-envisioning the future human species? To ourselves and our children, to our children's children and their children, we are responsible for their ability to thrive. We are becoming capable of evolving a more resilient human being, one that will not only be free of hereditary disease, but one that will outperform and outlast the humans of today. We have started by tackling serious diseases, and as we begin to improve our health and well-being, we will inevitably reduce our rate of aging and likely increase our lifespan. If we're able to engineer longevity, to push out the processes of aging to later, how will this change the way that we live? How will this change the way that we relate to one another, to our offspring or our great-great-grandchildren that we might one day meet, to future generations? If we change the nature of aging, are we also changing the nature of life? And are we changing the world? So as we move into the future, it will be interesting to see how medicine and technology coalesce and how healthcare will change. And like any new technology, there are those who will opt in and those who will opt out. And as gene therapy moves beyond health indications into other types of traits, not everyone will want to participate. So what will it mean for us as humans as we begin to engineer ourselves into a new species? However we move forward, our visions for technology, for medicine, for creativity and design, they need to be married to compassion and humanity. As a sister, as a daughter, a future mother, as a human being, I want to help create a world where preventable diseases describes most diseases, and where we can do something on the front end to prevent the suffering of patients and families, to allow us to live healthier lives for longer. So let's rewrite our own legacy to allow the next generation of humans a greater health span, a greater lifespan, and a better life. Thank you.